button here. Okay. Hi, everyone. So this is the second half of the data module. And this is the third week of the cohort. We are halfway through the program. That's very exciting. And so today I have, again, like just general reminders for the session. This call has been recorded and transcribed. So if you prefer to keep your camera off, that's totally fine. The video will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next few days. We have also captions, automatic captions available. You can follow the transcriptions in the link that we put at the top of the notepad. And you can also follow that link. If you click on the top left corner, you can see a message there that says Other AI. And if you click that, you can go to the transcription. We have a code of conduct and participation guidelines. You have been hearing about this several times. So as always, please just try to be kind to one another. That's the main point. And also, if you experience any issue with any of the participants, with any of the organizers, please send us an email. The email is in the notepad. And if you have to report an issue involving one of the organizers, also you can email one of the members individually, that is Joe or myself as well. We're going to have some activities today. And so to let us know how you prefer to participate, please add a W in front of your name if you prefer written participation, or an S in front of your name if you prefer spoken participation. And if you are okay with either of those, please still choose one for this week so that we can know which breakout room we can send you to. And with that, I'm gonna do a short recap of the program so far so that we all know where we are. I'm gonna share my screen really quickly. Okay, let me find that button again. Can you see that screen? Yeah, great. So as I was saying, we are in the third module, that is the data module. And last session, we saw an introduction to what we mean by open data and what we mean by FAIR principles, that is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And in this sessions, we are going to dive deeper into specific tools to make data fair, to use, make, and shared data. So that is repositories, data citation, open formats, metadata, licenses, and specific steps that you can follow to share your data. Some of these concepts might look familiar or might sound familiar because we have been hearing about them since the first week. And in this session specifically, we're going to see how they apply to data. Next week, we're going to move to code, and then the last week is going to be about results. But for now, we are in this kind of a stage that is more or less in the middle of the research process where people might be collecting data. So we're going to learn what tools are useful for this stage of the process. So that's our short recap. And with that, I would like to introduce our expert for this session, that is Pauline. And I just want to mention that Pauline is also part of the team who originally developed the materials on which this program is based on. So the program's for NASA. And so we're very, very happy to have her here with us today. So Pauline, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Right. Hello, everyone. My name is Pauline Carrega. Yes, I am a PhD student at the University of Manchester. Originally from Kenya. My background is in bioinformatics, and now I'm doing health, the impact of climate change on health. So I deal with environment data and health data also. Yeah, currently in Manchester. It just started raining outside. It was a sunny day. Yeah, it's all gray now. But yeah, nice to meet you all.
Yeah, thank you, Pauline. And I suppose that we can start your presentation.
Right, yes. Can you see my screen? Brilliant. I hope the thing you're seeing on my screen is welcome to Nebula.
It is, yes.
Good, good. Right, okay, so this is week 3, and I'm going to be taking you all through open data. So just a brief introduction of what open data is. So open data, it allows anyone to see, use, and verify published results. It's data that is accessible to anyone, not entirely accessible, or there's a phrase that we're going to see here today as we talk about open data. Yeah, but essentially open data is accessible to anyone, and it allows anyone to see, to use it, and to verify published results. And it is important, open data is important because it makes science more accessible, inclusive, and reproducible, and it's a big part of the FAIR principles, that's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Your data should be all these things so that we can be able to, or results are able to be results are able to be recreated, or science is able to be done across different parts of the world with the same data set. And all aspects of the data should meet all the criteria of FAIR, so that people are able to use it anywhere and from whichever field. But our main focus today is not to introduce open data, but what we'll be focusing on today is using open data, making open data, and sharing open data. So that was just a very brief introduction to open data. And I'll just jump straight ahead to using open data. Open data, first thing you need to do as a researcher usually is, first thing you think about is, what data am I going to use to create the results or answer the research questions that I have? So usually first thing you think about is, I am going to have to collect primary data. And in some cases, collecting that primary data is going to take a long time. It's going to be very expensive, and sometimes you do not have the funding or the time to do that. So what data do you use? Where do you find it? That's where open data comes into place. And in terms of using open data, we have to think about it from the aspect of, it's not just as a collector, as the person creating the data creator, collecting the primary data, you have to think about the person who is going to use it later on. So what do you need to make it usable? And this slide says open data can be discovered by accessing data repositories, search portals. Sorry, just, yeah, search portals and publications. And a wide variety of these resources are available. And a key step is identifying appropriate search terms for your application. So where do you start in terms of using open data? You have to use key terms in order for your data to be findable. Usually you put your open data in repositories, you put them in publications. But if people are not able to find it, or if you make it so hard for people to find, this becomes an issue for them to be able to use your data. So common places where you find, you look for open data, you look for them in journals or research ads, you find them in software environments. You can ask your colleagues about the type of data that they've used and if it is open, so that they're able to find it, or you're able to find it to use. You can search on the websites or different webs. You can search in different data repositories. And one of the activities that we're going to do today is finding out what open data repositories are available for use. Yep. Yes, but once you find the open data, what do you do with it? Is it useful to you to use? Are you able to answer your questions? If you remove so I will not collect my data myself. If you remove that from your list of things to do to be able to answer your research questions, the open data that you find, what does it look like? Is it useful to you? This is one of the most important questions you have to answer when you're using open data. So again, the open data you find, it has to be useful to you. It has to be good data. So what are the aspects of this open data that makes it good to use? So does it have any metadata attached to it so that it explains where it was collected, how it was collected, the variables that are present in it? Do I need to use specific software? All this is answered by the documentation and the metadata, which we will cover later on. And also, I believe you've heard a lot about metadata from the previous session. How should I cite the data? All these things should be available to you once you find the data, and every single thing that is in this cloud, it tells you if the open data that you find, if it is good. So this is just some of the criteria that you go through so that you figure out if your open data is good and if it will answer your question. And once you found your open data and it looks good, what next? A key aspect of this, once you find that open data and you're using it, it's important to give credit where it's due. So you have to cite it, and you have to cite it well. You have to acknowledge the people who collected it, the people who've the organizations, and usually if the data is good, you'll be provided with citation information that allows you to cite the open data properly. So we will see again down the line during some of the activities that we're going to do, what type of how citations look, how good citations look, and how you should cite open data if you find it and if it's good, right? So the second major part of this presentation is once you've identified that you're going to be using open data, and for example, if you find yourself that you're going to be collecting your own primary data, you have to be able to make it open. Oh, I should have said at any point, if you have any question, just interrupt me and just ask the question, and also put it in the Etherpad, and I will answer them, and also in the chats. Yeah. So second part of this presentation, again, making data open. Once you've identified your data, you've collected it, you've collected it, and you want to be able to also help others to answer possible questions that they might have in their own research. And you think that your data might be useful to them. An important aspect is to make your data open. So the objective of this part of the lesson or the presentation is to learn criteria and tasks that you need to ensure that data sets you make are open and reusable. So we'll talk about documentation, we'll talk about version control, we'll talk a little bit about licenses as well. So as you plan on making your data open, first you have to think about a data management plan. At this point, there's a small activity that is in the Etherpad, but I would want us to do it from here so that we in the open room, so that we see like what people understand about a data management plan. So if you can help me out, just
so I will share the link to the notepad, and we are on line 69. There is a space for the activity and the instructions there.
Could you ask the question out loud for me? I forgot.
Yeah, so the first question that Pauline is asking here is, what are some data management plan creation tools that are available for use? So that's the first question.
Just that one question. I just need,
Sure.
Yeah. Could we take 5 minutes and see what people come up with?
In the Etherpads, best?
Etherpad or chat, we can put our answers in both.
Super. There.
So I can give us one common data management plan tool that is available for use is DMP Online. I like that one because it gives you all the prompts that are possible so that you can create a data management plan. Oh, nice. Thanks, Irene, for the link in the chat. Maybe I should give a shout out to my university. At this point, they also have a very intense data management plan tool that helps you create a data management plan. That's also a very nice one. Does anyone have any other ones that they may have found? Nice. Right, so yeah, still have a few minutes to go.
I'm just gonna second DMP online, although I may have used exactly the same templates as Pauline because she's currently being supervised under my supervisor.
Are there any responses in the Etherpad? If not,
Yeah, so we have
Yep.
several responses. People are sharing that Opus in Germany helps a little bit, and research data management organizers for DFA projects. I'm not sure what is DFA projects. If whoever shared that answer can give us the definition of that DFA projects. Yeah, but that's one answer. There is the DMP tool. I think maybe you shared that one, Polly, and also DMP online. There's another list here that, oh no, someone is deleting their answer. Just leave it there. It's great to have all of that, all of those resources that we can look at later. But they're sharing Argos by OpenAir. And other people are sharing about data management platform creation tools that include Adobe Audience Manager, Salesforce Audience Studio, Oracle, Bluecay. Yeah, so I think, as Joe was saying, that might be a little different from what we're thinking here. Those look more like commercial tools for marketing. So maybe we can just think about the difference between open data more for research and these other tools. Yeah, so those are some of the answers. There's also the OSF. I think it's Open Science Framework. And oh, okay, so DFG is the German Research Foundation. So as you were saying, Pauline, that some universities or organizations have their own templates or their own data management tools as well. Luciana on the chat is thinking about Zotero, which she says, I believe it's not a DMP, but a tool that helps with data management. So maybe we can also, oh, yeah, Joe.
I've just realized I did that thing where I got confused between Zotero and Zenodo again.
Right.
My comment on Zotero, but I was
Oh.
talking about Zenodo. I'm sorry. Ignore what I said. It's complete nonsense.
Right. Yeah, and see all these data management plans, the first thing you need to think about really when you're thinking about making your data open is this data management plan, because it helps it guides you in terms of thinking about how to make your data open, if you should make your data open, how you should make your data open, when this should be done, and who plays what role. The university ones guide you in terms of the school will not allow you to make this open, or we will have to hold it ourselves for this amount of time. So the first thing really when you're making your open data is think about having the data management plan. And I'm so glad that you have given the tools yourselves, which, yeah, awesome. So Another thing you need to consider before you make your data open is the format that your data is going to be in. So the format of the data has to be compatible with the tools that in use for the sake of interoperability. So what is the size, the data size, the data shape, the data type, is the data format consider the field that you're working in? Is the data format commonly used in your field? Does the data format have adequate metadata support? And in a few minutes, you're going to see the difference between metadata and documentation, and all that. There are tools available to open your data, the format of your data. And another thing that is constantly coming up, especially with the tools that are available for use, especially with data, is are they being managed so that it will allow your data, even as it is being used continuously, as it is open, to be able to be used long term. Yeah. So once we know that we have our open data, so context, where do we get the context of the data? You have your data, all of it, and it's big data and it's small data. Context, the thing that gives us context, especially with data. Some examples of formats of open data formats include CSV files, common data files, or common data format, that is CDF, HDF. The H is a very difficult word to pronounce, hierarchical data format. Yeah, so these are just some open data format examples, and non-open data format examples include doc, and just docs files, AutoCAD drawing files, those are DWGs, and Adobe Photoshop files. So when you're making your data open, these are some of the things that you need to consider, especially in terms of formatting. And in terms of context now, I will go back to my meme, and then context. What gives you open data context? It's your metadata and your documentation, especially it makes it important for reusability. So metadata is essentially different from documentation in terms of metadata is machine readable, and it's well structured, it's well organized, versus documentation, which is it's well organized, yes, but it is less structured. So I will give an example that is from where I got the source, from the source of these notes. Think of metadata and documentation as a recipe. All the very clinical steps and definitions in the recipe, those are metadata. One that you can enter in Google search and find, that is metadata, but documentation is the history of the recipe. Yes, and just a story about the recipe or whatever it is you're making. So metadata is the primary way for users how they will find information about your data set. So how the data was collected and processed, important variables in the data, and how they are related. So all these aspects you will find within your metadata, and it helps users find the data, understand it, and makes it easier for analysis. And then documentation accompanies the metadata. So it can be a README file, or it can be a text file or a PDF file. It acts as a user guide for the data. So it has important information also, contact information, data collection methods in detail, can be in detail, the versions, the licenses, the references, information about file structure and naming, references to publications that are linked to the data and how it was processed. All these are found in documentation. So an important aspect to remember is metadata is machine readable, and there are tools to also help you with building your metadata. Right. And with this, another important aspect to be able to make your data reusable is licensing. So by applying a license, this is a quote from Open Knowledge Base. By applying a license to your work, you make it clear what others can do with the things that you're sharing, and also the conditions under which you're providing them, like citing you. Again, it is important to give credit where it's due. You can also share, you can also require others who copy your work to do things in return. Really like that quote. It puts into context the importance of licensing, and because data is the intellectual property of researchers. So this is what they give, this is their output, and you would want people to ask you before using something that is important to you, and provide guidance for people to use it so that they do not use it to cause harm, or it's basically to cause harm. And this is why licenses are important. So it's a legal document that tells users how they can use the data set. There's also another activity at this point. What are the common types of licenses that are available to use, and that is mostly usually attached to data? Can we put 5 minutes again? So look for terms like CCO, CC BY, and then just answer, just 5 minutes.
So we are on line 90 of the notepad, and you can see the question there, what are the type of licenses, and you have a space to answer. And you can also say if you don't know, that's also a valid answer. Yeah, so let's give a few minutes for people to share their answers, and then we can continue the discussion with Pauline.
Can I extend this and ask if you have links to the licenses you're talking about? I've actually not heard of a couple of these, and I would love to be able to look them up. So if you can share those links, that would be handy.
So I'm starting to see the answers are slowing down and people are sharing several examples. We have the Creative Commons and specifically Creative Commons attribution license, that's the CC BY license. We also have mentions of Creative Commons non-derivatives, the CC BY ND license, and the public domain license, that is the CC0 license. People are sharing also the Open Data Commons, and within that, the Open Data Commons Open Database license. That's new to me. That's interesting. The Open Data Commons Attribution license and the Open Data Commons Public Domain Dedication and license. I'm really curious to read more about this. People are also sharing other types of open licenses, open source licenses that are more for software, proprietary licenses even. So yeah, those are some examples that people are sharing. Polly, do you want to discuss some differences between these examples?
So at this point, Orange come clean. I'm not I have only used open data, and I wanted to ask maybe has someone applied for a license? Is it applied for really? How do I ask this question? Does anyone have any personal experiences in terms of using these licenses and how they went about it, just citing it, obtaining it, and such? I hope my question is understandable. Just a personal experience, just feel free to share. Just for like 5 minutes, if we could do that. Make it a little bit personal in terms of licenses instead of just explaining things. And thank you for the resources and the examples again. Or can I pass it to you? You, have you used, sorry, I'm zeroing in on you, but personal experience with using open licenses?
Sure. I know that you're just saying this because you've been reading my papers, and that's all right, because if someone's been reading my papers, the world is a good place. I say this as a vain researcher. So one thing that I might share is that actually very often we inadvertently misuse licenses. So there's a lot of different licenses out there, as we've just seen. And I think Irene and I were at least both surprised by the Open Data Commons, which I see is by the Open Knowledge Foundation. And I'm like, how have I not heard of this before? I literally have books like right here, open source software, a free software licensing, right? I try to live and breathe this stuff, so I'm really surprised to find these. And I think one thing to recognize is that just applying a license, I mean, licenses can be so boring. You open any of these and you look through and there's this awful legalese, right? And no one wants to read it. But these do, unfortunately, frustratingly, really matter. So what licenses generally do when they're open licenses is they look at copyright, which is designed to make people not have to share their stuff and to charge money for sharing their stuff. And that's fine, right? We all have to put bread on the table. But they actually subvert that copyright and they say, I'm using my copyright to give you the right to do whatever the heck you want with this. And the reason that we have many different types of these licenses, and the reason I was saying that we sometimes put the wrong one on, is because there's different ways to use things. So maybe I have image data, right? And if I have image data, if you put a code license that says you can run this image, It doesn't really make any sense because there's nothing to run in an image. You look at it, you share it, you copy it, you modify it. But what you actually want is a license that makes sense, that says that you can copy it, that you can modify it, right? Whereas if you have a bit of software, a bit of code, maybe a couple of lines in SPSS, maybe even, I don't know, some formulas in an Excel spreadsheet, you don't want to have a license that only permits you to make modifications. You want a license that permits you to run that code as well. So making sure that the license that you're using actually makes sense to apply in a different scenario makes sense. And even people who are familiar with licenses might come back and say, oh, I don't know about this one. What are you talking about? So my first rule would be if you're sharing stuff with other people, figure out what's common and useful in your domain, what other people use, why they use it. You might say, no, I don't agree. For example, if my colleague said, yeah, I always use Excel and I know I could do CSV and that will be more open, then you probably want to go with CSV. But my honest single bit of advice for making a single bit of data or code or images or whatever it might be open is figure out what needs to be done with it and what's normally done with this type of data so that it can be used in the future correctly, because it's harder to change a license once you've put it on than it is to put the right one on in the first place. So for example, if you had a document that was licensed for you had a particular license and 20 years down the line, you've had 30 people edit it, theoretically, you need permission from every one of those 30 people to change the license, which won't be easy. Whereas changing it when you have just created it, much easier. So yeah, I do use licenses, but just gently think and make sure you're using the right one before you do, would be my advice. If I talked for way too long, Pauline?
Just the right amount of time. There's a small prompt from Irene in the chat, which I really, I mean, if there are people with a background in law, I am also curious about just like a few sentences in terms of what they think about this topic. If not, it's okay. Wait, okay. Going once, going twice. Brilliant. So again, with data, especially the domain that you're working in, this is a very sensitive topic. I think I've been to a bunch of conferences just talking about licenses. I always end up just leaving them, just wondering to myself, okay, so I know CC BY, which is relevant to me. I will use that. And now working with a different type of data set, very different type of data set from what I'm used to. This is a whole other conversation now in licensing. So I'm also going to use the resources that you put up in the Etherpad. So thank you very much. And thank you for sharing the experience with licenses. Anyhow, common types of licenses, you've already shared most of them in the chat or in the Etherpad, but CCO, which is the public domain license that allows for most reuse, CC BY, which is commonly used by scientific data that requires citation. Again, that's the one that I am myself most comfortable with. And then there's Creative Commons, which is commonly used for data sets. So check with your organization. Again, as you're making your data management plan, you will probably find a prompt about licensing so that you ensure that your data is well licensed for reuse, because licensing is very important to make your data reusable, right? Okay, right. Sharing, open data sharing. This is the essentially the last part of the the conversation. Sharing is caring. Yes, so sharing open data. So with this small section on sharing, we're going to learn about the main objective is to learn about the practice of sharing your data. So how to evaluate if your data is shareable and accessible. Yeah, looking into repositories and the life cycle of your data from selecting the repo to maintaining and archiving your data. So data sharing should typically be done through a long-term data center or repository, which will be responsible for just taking your data, making it shareable and open and accessible, and then publishing it. But the most common type or the most common way that we always end up sharing our data is via email, or we put it up on websites. But some common steps that we use, or yeah, to share our data is make sure that your data is data can actually be shared. So ask whoever is at the top, or yes, first ask, can I actually be able to share my data? Check the format of your data. If it is shareable, then select or identify a repository to host your data. There's so many repositories out there to host your data. Open Science Framework, Zenodo, Figshare, such repositories, they're available to be able to share your data. Working with your repository, all these repositories have multiple guidelines and policies for you to be able to meet their requirements. So you have to see what that looks like. Make sure your data is findable and accessible through that repository, and it's maintained and archived. Then request a DOI for your data set so that it's easy to cite. Giving credit where it's due, it's very important. And then choosing a data license, which we have just talked about. So an important question to ask. So sharing may be caring, but when is it taking it way too far? So there are different types of sharing. So we have advanced sharing, where you share your data as early as possible. As soon as you share, as soon as you collect your data, that's when you start about sharing it. So we have funding agencies that determine how far can you actually take it in terms of sharing your data. So again, the first step, just checking, can I actually share my data? So whoever it is, you need to ask your funding organization. It determines the type of sharing that you're going to be doing. Is it advanced sharing, just sharing it at the time of collection, or after you have done some pre-processing of it? Does the organization have embargo periods where it tells you we have to hold the data for 5 years without anyone else seeing it, and then after that you can actually put it out there? Intermediate sharing, this is done at the time of publication. So many publications and some funding agencies require sharing data that is needed to reproduce results at the time of publication. I think most of us have encountered intermediate sharing, or sorry, most of us in life sciences have encountered this part where you have to make your data, you have to give the publisher's data that you collected and that you used for them to also put it in the publication. Minimum sharing, this is done at the end of a grant. All scientifically useful data should be shared by the end of a research grant. So Unfortunately, I don't know much about this part. Most of the research I've done, I've heavily relied on open data and and then there's no sharing whatsoever. So there are many reasons data should either be restricted or not shared at all. Our last, if I may, very last prompt, when are some of the times and some of the data sets that you all think should be shared, and what are some incidences you think that sharing is not appropriate? Can you put 5 minutes again? And put it in the chat again.
Yeah, so we are on line 127, 129, and you can see the question there and space for you to answer. Let's give a few minutes for people to share their answers, and then we come back to the discussion.
Would people like a breakout group so they could talk about it a bit? Because I think we might have time.
Okay, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna make a couple of breakout groups. Keep on typing, but you'll see yourselves being transported, and we'll give you a few minutes as soon as those are made. Hey, I've opened those rooms, my friend. You will have about 10 minutes. Please take time to discuss with others if you're not sure or if you disagree with something.
Hi, everyone. I think we're all back in the main room, and I hope you had a great discussion in the breakout rooms. In the last few minutes of the session, we have a few questions on the chat and on the Etherpad. So we're gonna move on to those questions. And so the first one is, there are many data management plan creation tools. When there are several tools, how to choose which one will suit better for the project that I will be planning to use in? So Pauline, can you help us with that question?
Great. Yes. So DMP online, it's a nice tool that it's like anyone can use it. It's not like super specific to a specific field. So I would advise that, especially if it's your first time just creating the DMP, the data management plan. So have a look at that. If your university has one, or organization has one, if they have one, that is also a good place to start off. But if you DMP online, it's very reliable. Questions are straightforward. It's easy to answer, and by the time you're done, you have very good understanding of how your data management plan should look like. And or you already have your DMP, data management plan, and it's pretty awesome. So I would definitely recommend DMP online.
Yeah, thanks. It's really great to have a starting point when there are so many tools and there's so much information. It can be overwhelming. And a similar question is, how do you know which license serves the targeted purpose better? And I'm going to pass this question to Joe.
Thank you. It's a really good question. And I've got to warn you, if you get some licensing nerds together in a room, there could be hours and hours of discussion and possibly fist fights. I'm going to try and condense this down to 1 or 2 minutes of advice instead. So my first question would be, what is the purpose of your sharing? Think about that and let that be part of your guiding star. For example, do I want to share this so that other scientists can use it and benefit from it? Do I want a commercial organization to benefit from it? Do I want other people to modify it and reshare it? Because you can change all of those restrictions depending on what you want and what you need and why you're sharing what you're sharing. For example, I'm not in love with the no derivatives types of licenses. It's like, well, if I'm sharing it, but no one else is allowed to take it further and share what they've modified, in my mind, I feel like, why have I shared it anyway? But I know it makes some people feel safer. So maybe it's better that you share that at all with no derivatives as an option rather than not sharing it. Or maybe you're like, I'm going to put the no commercial clause on it because it's a thing that people can, if you share something openly, people have had their thesis shared legally and sold on Amazon. Don't quite know why people do that, but it is a thing, right? So there's reasons why you might choose one or another. So thinking about the purpose is great. But then there's more to it because, as I mentioned earlier, what type of stuff are you sharing? Different things have different reasons to be shared in a different way. So the simplest rule that I would start with is if you have a raw data set that you think should be mixed with other data sets. So an example of this might be in biology. Let's say I have a set of genes and I want someone else to merge this into a larger set of genes, right? I would probably put CC0, that's Creative Commons 0, the open, a completely public domain. And the reason for that is that people might be reluctant to share data if they have to merge a bunch of data sets and say, this bit came from you and this bit came from you. Because think of it like cake, right? Once you put your eggs and your flour and your chocolate in there, you can't take it out. You can't say the eggs came from here and the chocolate came from here. It's all just one big mix. So if you think your data is going to be reused in a big mix, if it's going to become cake, CC0 is a great choice. If that didn't make sense, but now you want chocolate cake, I'm sorry. Failing that, if you have image data, table data, raw data that is in some sort of textual format, I would use the Creative Commons license chooser. And someone is going to magically make that license chooser pop into the chat right now, I'm sure. I love it. If you're writing software code, or if you're writing anything else, then I would recommend chooserlicense.com. I'll pop links for both of those into the chat and to the Etherpad right now. That's me done.
Thank you, Joe. Are there any other questions at this point? I'm gonna wait in an awkward silence so that everyone has time to think. You can write your question in the chat, in the pad, or just raise your hand and ask your question out loud. Esdras.
Okay, thank you for letting me ask my question. It's something that just came to my mind and it looks strange. We are talking about licenses, like you get license for the data for the research products that you share. And for us programmers, especially, what we do usually is that when you're uploading the repository on GitHub, you can just decide and choose like any license that you want or that you feel it's relevant to what you shared on GitHub. Like the GPL license, for instance, the one I'm using. But my problem is that we are literally just copying a file that is called a license and adding to a project. There is no central organization or government, or we don't even need to apply for it. So how valuable can these licenses be? Because you are not, it's like you just decide to take a document and add to a project and say, yeah, we have a license. So I don't know if you get the question I'm trying to ask, how relevant it is. Shouldn't there be a government or an organization, an international organization that we can apply to and that grants us the licenses, or we should just be copying documents into our projects? Thank you.
I can get this one, Pauline, Irene, if that's okay. All right, this is where I'm like, I know we have like former attorneys in the room, and I'm just hoping they're not like patent attorneys laughing at me for saying weird stuff. If that's the case, I hope that you will be gentle to me. So I think the problem with the word license is there's many ways it can be used. So it could be that you've got a driving license, right? And when you have a driving license, the license says you have permission to legally drive. But when we're talking about licenses for data, we're talking about it the other way around. So this is you. You already own that data or that code that you've just uploaded to GitHub or to Zenodo or wherever it may be. And what you're doing when you put a license on is you are saying to anyone else, they have the license to use that data. So it's like you are signing, like you are in the case, the government, right? Because you're the person who owns the data. And you're saying to other people, here, you have the right to use the data that I have created. So it's the same word, but the direction is very different because when you apply a license, you're not asking for permission. You're not requesting it from a governing body, but instead you are assigning it. And the reason that we have things like the GPL or Creative Commons that you can pick from that list is because people have written them. They've said, these are possible uses that people might want to do with their data or with their code or with their images or whatever, or their artwork, their recipes, right? And they've said, these are common possible use cases, and we will write some legal language that will allow them to share this with other people. And if you actually look in a lot of the licenses, the things that they will say might be, you can use this data, but don't come crying to me if something doesn't work, right? We're covering our legal bottoms. We're saying, we're sharing this, but I'm not going to be liable if you do something silly with it. And so it's really useful because these licenses not only give people permission to reuse what you're doing, but they protect you. Some of them might say, I have the right to patent this, or when you share this, please make sure that you share it with other people. So think of a license as a set of instructions in boring ass legalese that doesn't make sense to anyone, but nevertheless, a set of instructions that tell people how they can use the work that you have created, permissions that you are giving someone else. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. I want to add a little thing, please. It just reminds me of what we call the patent. I don't know if that's the word in English as well. So is a patent a license, or is it the opposite of a license? Because when you create something new, you get a patent for it to protect your intellectual property. How similar or different is it from a license?
Ooh, we're getting into difficult grounds here, or I'm going to just have to hold up a sign saying I am definitely not a lawyer. So I'm going to say roughly what I think, but if you take my legal advice here, don't. Just don't. This is not legal advice. A patent, as you said, people generally get because they don't want people to use the thing they've created without paying money or getting permission first. A license is in some ways almost the opposite, because what you're saying is, I want you to be able to use this. And you don't need to get my permission first, and you probably don't need to ask me for money either. So in some ways they're opposites, but I'm sure there is so much legal nuance here that I have just been like, this is why I was saying, get licensed nerds in a room. And I was like, unsure, Ahmed, unsure. Can different components of a project be licensed under different licenses? Yeah, they can. A good example of this might be, let's say you have an informational website. The code might be licensed under a code license, and the text, the content, the information, the pictures might be licensed under a different license, because the code would want a code license, and you might want a Creative Commons on a content license. I've completely taken over. We could ask license questions for 100 years. Should I give this back to Irene and Pauline?
So thank you, Joe. Those have been really great questions. And Swati, I see that you also have some experience applying licenses to different components, different types of licenses to different components. So I'm curious to see if you can share in the chat more about that experience. But for now, we have 5 minutes left, and I want to go back to Pauline.
I really thought you wanted I really thought you wanted me to answer this right away. So in this big project that we have, there are components of it that we've licensed under different things. The first set, so we've got a lot of normal data, right? Like the experimental data that we're like, okay, if you want to use it, go ahead, use it. But at the same time, we've got some proprietary methods in which we are basically designing a product. So this is super confidential. Like, so when we make our DMP, we say, okay, sensitive can be shared only even within the organization. It's only with a few people, like with project leads. So we've got like super segregate, I mean, I don't want to say it, but anyway, segregated data. So this is something that I think exists for individual data sets. And just to sort of follow up on Esdra's question, when he said that, is there like a standard organization for licensing? I personally think that, I mean, you did a really great job answering this whole question, but I don't know if guidelines need a standardization. You know, the guideline itself is standard, right? It tells you clearly that these are the rules by which you play. And then you don't need one authority to say, okay, what you do and how you do it with your data, because you have that right to say, okay, that this is my data, do what you want to do. But again, if you mess up, this is on you. If it's great, share it with me, so on and so forth, you know? So because individual organizations, for example, if you use these bibliographic journals like Archive, ChemArchive, or BioArchive, or whatever, they've got a specific, so they become the body that governs any dispute in said matter. Like say you say, okay, you use CC BYU, CC 4.0, ND, NC, whatever. So this organization does it differently. Likewise, if you use a different platform, they have some rules that will sort of help you in the event of dispute. But I think the standardization aspect is the general guidelines. And I think it comes down from an ethical bearing as human beings we have, you know, like a moral code of conduct sort of. So yeah, I mean, if it helps address, this is just a small thought on the matter.
Thank you. It helps.
Sorry, I wasted everybody's time. It took like 3 minutes.
No, that's amazing. I want to go back to Pauline just to let her close her presentation. If anyone needs to drop off at the hour, at the half hour, we totally understand. But yeah, Pauline, please.
Right. Okay. I mean, that was amazing. Just the final few minutes of this is just taking from what you guys or the prompt, what data should not be shared. So data that is harmful, health data is not harmful. Just to mention that health data should not be openly shared. Countries' military secrets, just there's a whole list of things that I'm sure you guys had amazing discussions on what data should be shared and what data should not be shared. Right, am I going forward or am I going back? Yes, and then just to finish off, how to enable reuse and of your data. So obtaining a DOI, it would not be an open data conversation if we did not talk about DOI. So obtaining a DOI is very important, especially when you're sharing data and if you want it to be open, because this is how people are able to cite you and give credit where it is due. So obtaining a DOI, it's done by submitting your organization will submit will request the DOI once they have submitted the data to like a data repository or to an organization or the publisher, and then a DOI will be assigned to your data. Enabling findability, this is usually done by the repositories. So there are multiple repositories that you can use. So it entirely depends on, again, your organization. Do they have, the repository that you want to use, there are some conditions or some options to consider before you select that. Sponsorship or funding, is there a specific one they want you to use? Does your organization recommend one for you? A domain-specific repo, depending on the work that you're doing. Once you read the about page of this repository and you like what they essentially have to offer, some of them cost you money. So that is also an thing that you look at before you select the repository that you want to share your data in. But essentially, yes, findability is that is a responsibility that the repository takes or has. That's their responsibility. And then make it easy to cite your data. So in the citation statement or the .cff statement, .cff file, have everyone that collected the data clearly identify the creators of the data, the institutions. If you can include their ORCIDs, if they have one, do that. So make it very easy to cite your data. And then the responsibility of sharing the data, that's a team effort. And within your DMP, you can break down the role of everyone. Your responsibility is putting the data in the repository that we have selected. Your responsibility is responding to the emails if you receive the emails about the data that you people created. Yes, it's really just a team effort. If you're able to talk about your data and help people who are not able to collect the primary data, the responsibility is essentially it's yours. Yeah. And with that, thank you very much. And any questions? We are good for questions again.
Thank you so much, Pauline. Can we give Pauline a round of applause, please? Yes. I think we are over time. So if you have any questions, you can leave them in the notepad and we'll make sure to go through them. And so answer there and you can go back and see the answers. So I know that we have talked about many of these open tools in very general terms. Your coaching sessions would be the space to ask specifically how they apply to your project, to your domains, and to continue these discussions and get more personalized feedback. So don't worry if these tools and all of these terms are very new. Those coaching sessions, again, are the space for you to really continue these conversations. And with that, I'm gonna stop the recording.